All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for logging on to Centercourt 360 and I Survived COVID-19 with Dan Venenzia. My name is Stephen Bianco, and I will be moderating today's event, but our special guest is Dan Venenzia. Dan is a former professional baseball player with the Minnesota Twins organization. At this current time, Dan directs camps and clinics and gives private lessons throughout the tri-state area. He's also a sought-out public speaker and is the author of the book Coach Dan on sportsmanship and a children's pictures book. Over the past 7 seasons of coaching baseball, his recreational coaching record is 85-5 with 6 championships along with 3 undefeated seasons. And back in 1989, Dan led Fort Hamilton High School to an undefeated city championship, which was eventually played at Yankee Stadium. His club of the Youth Service League made it to the Connie Mack World Series, where he played alongside teammate the great Manny Ramirez, received a scholarship to Concordia College in Bronxville, New York. In 1992, he led the nation in stolen bases when he stole 30 bases in 31 games. But most importantly, tonight, we have an opportunity to hear Dan's story about how he survived COVID-19 and the many lessons that he learned with this, going through this disease and being affected by it, but also what he found about it. What we have an opportunity today is Dan has some, Dan's possible book coming out as well. And we get to kind of hear that inside story about how he went through COVID and his experiences. And I think it's a pleasure for all of you to listen to and learn from tonight. Dan is an outstanding person, an incredible athlete, an amazing father, terrific husband, and all-around incredible guy that all of us can learn from. So I want to introduce Dan Venenzia to all of you. He's the super handsome gentleman in the red with the black chair over there. Dan, to start it off, I'd love for you to sort of go back in time a little bit and seeing some adults on here today, and there's some kids as well, but to the adults, give a little background of what was it like growing up New York City, 1980s. We hear so many stories about New York City, and if you lived up in the area, you were there, but what was it like growing up a kid in 1980s in New York City and then making it to the Minnesota Twins?
Well, thank you, Stephen, Matt. Thank you, Centercourt, for having me. When I say I'm truly blessed to be here, that's an understatement for what I went through 7 weeks ago. But to reflect back to those times, I have nothing but great memories. But I did grow up in some of the rougher neighborhoods in Brooklyn. And I was born and raised youngest of 4 children, raised by a single-parent mother who taught me about hard work, taught me about mental toughness, and taught me about having a faith-filled resiliency. And I needed all those things, not only to get me through this latest COVID battle, but to get me to that level to play professional baseball. I grew up playing stickball in the street. It was a broomstick handle. We didn't have much money, and a Spalding ball the kids in the neighborhood would chip in for, and we played sewer to sewer in the streets. That was home plate and second base, and then we picked out a tire or a bumper, a rear or front bumper for first and third. And, talk about love for the game. We played until the street lamps went on, until we were called in for supper. And I always had this passion for baseball, and I was pretty good at it. But the work ethic I learned from my mother, I think, is key. She was my hero and role model. We talk about, I know as young athletes, those of you that are on, you look up to professional athletes to be your role models. And I did the same. It was Don Mattingly, Kirby Puckett, Cal Ripken Jr. But as you get a little older, you realize that the role models are people all around you. They're teachers such as yourselves, coaches, family members that sort of teach you those values that you need long after you stop playing the game. But those days in the 80s in Brooklyn were a lot of fun. And, I had a dream and I put my mind to it. I had a strong focus. And again, I had some ability to go along with it, but I think the work ethic took me to a higher level from a lot of the players I played with. I hit puberty a little late. I didn't really grow until my freshman year of college. So I didn't have the big offers that a lot of these younger players are having. I went to a D2 college, but I took the scholarship and ran with it. I was happy. I was fortunate to do that. But the work ethic stayed with me. So all those players that may have had more talent than I did, they sort of leveled off at a certain spot because they weren't putting in the work. So if I can give any advice to the young athletes out there, it's you can only get by on your talent for so long. Eventually, there'll be someone with the same talent that's working a little bit harder than you. So I would make sure you do the work and prepare.
You talk about that you mentioned resiliency, and we'll probably get into that as we get into the most recent story and what you were able to overcome. But tell a little more about, you mentioned the days of stickball in the streets and, really out there, truly grinding it out. How did that help you when you said, hey, I didn't hit puberty until later? And that's something that a lot of young kids, need to hear a lot of times, that, that didn't happen until later on. But the resiliency I built up, the playing, the constant love for the game, the playing in the street, how do you think that lifestyle prepared you for, first, prepared you to be at a level mentally to begin the quest as a professional baseball player when others, they have all the talent in the world. But at the end of the day, then you're in there in the trenches of actually having to perform at this high level. How do you think that upbringing and that true passion for the game helped you begin to achieve as you climbed up the ladder in professional baseball?
Tremendously, in so many different ways. One way was I was a short guy. So, I didn't, as they said, I didn't really grow until later on. So I had a little chip on my shoulder. I had to outwork my opponent. Also, I have two older brothers. So I kind of tagged along them because if I was playing with kids my own age, I wasn't getting any better. So we didn't really play in the organized leagues. It was all choose-up games. And hanging out with the older crowd certainly helped me from an athletic standpoint. But then the trade-off there is sometimes that can hurt you in a social and an emotional way, right? Because you're not with your classmates or your teammates. And you see that a lot with these, pristine athletes that are younger, that are constantly playing 2 and 3 levels up. And they sort of lose out on that childhood and, hanging out with their peers and their kids their age. I sort of it was a miracle, Stephen, I got to tell you, man, because a lot of the kids I hung out with ended up in jail, on drugs, or dead. And, the baseball saved me, no doubt. I had this one gentleman, he was a guardian angel, I call him. He was my next door neighbor. His name was Mr. Romano. And one day I was hanging out across the street with my so-called friends, and he called me over and he said something to me that stuck with me, and I want to share it with your viewers here. He said, "Show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are." And I looked back across the street and it was as if I stepped out of my body, and that's not who I was, because they were painting graffiti on the front door. They were drinking beer out of a brown paper bag. And he said, "Isn't it time to go up for dinner?" "Yes, Mr. Romano." He believed in me. He saw something in me that I probably didn't see in myself. And I began sort of hanging out with the right kids, on the diamond rather than on the corner. But I did get myself into quite a bit of trouble up until that point. And, we all need that coach, that mentor, that person to sort of put us on the right path.
That's such a trend today, Dan. People, we talk about that often, how everybody needs somebody or everybody needs something. We can't do any of this on our own. And we sometimes forget. And that's why stories like this are so important, not just for kids, but also for adults. We, as grown individuals, it's still the same effect that Mr. Romano said to you. Hey, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are, right? At this point in life, and also who you're still going to become. We're still trying to achieve who we're going to become in life, right? We're always on that quest. At least we should be. And it's why stories like this of being able to have the opportunity, being on a platform like Centercourt 360 is really the motto of what 360 is about, giving the opportunities for young individuals to have this full circle effect to life, right? That, yes, there's a core competency in Centercourt about sports. And through sports, just like you, Dan, through sports, you had an opportunity to make choices in life, in which direction you were going to go. Were you going to be on the corner in New York City 1980s with the brown paper bag, or were you going to were you going to focus on the diamond, right? Were you going to be able to hear someone like Mr. Romano, giving that voice to you? And it was an individual like that, backed by the backbone of your mom. And she did everything she possibly could to support and raise you and give you that foundation. Then it's the words of somebody else. And so many great people have had those words. We hear today, we listen to the story of Michael Jordan so much in The Last Dance, and how powerful James Jordan, his father, was on the foundation of how he thought about life, how he went about life. We get those moments of his dad sitting next to him and Jordan hugging the trophy and the reasons behind that. So, I love the fact that you mentioned that, because that's so much about what this organization is about, what 360 is about, is that having, young people having the ability to have such incredible mentors around you, like you, Dan, that can give them these words of wisdom, this open mindset, so that we can help and guide them through the tough times that they may face, so that their life has a full 360 effect on it. So, baseball, led you out of New York City to university, to the Minnesota Twins. Kind of take us from there. What did you get from the Twins organization? Where did you go from there? And kind of, start guiding us to where you're at today.
Okay, let me just to piggyback off of what you said with these role models. There was one other person that stepped in, because I had a choice to go to Brooklyn College. I was D1, and I only bring this up because I know this is a big topic with a lot of the young athletes, right? Everybody wants D1,
D2,
they don't want to do
D3.
anything, right? And, I guess I wasn't any different back then, but I had two offers only. It was a D2 school in Bronxville, which is about an hour away from my house from Brooklyn, where there was actually trees, and then Brooklyn College in the city, D1. I remember the coach calling me up, and my brother-in-law stepped in at the time, and he said, Brooklyn will be here when you get back. Go away to school. Get away from the neighborhood. Get away from the distractions. And I took that advice. Now, if he didn't say that, I probably would have gone to Brooklyn College, and maybe my path would have been different, and I wouldn't have ended up, with the Twins. Who knows? But so I'll take you through it. Played 4 years at Concordia College, a lot of ups and downs, and, rough freshman year. I didn't really hit the books the way I should have. And trip to the dean's office, and he said, grades up, or your scholarship's gone and you're out of here. And that was the cold, glass of water in my face. And I decided to put the same amount of passion into the classroom as I did on the sports field. And it paid off. Dean's list for 6 consecutive semesters, 4.0 senior year. So I went from a 1.7 to a 4.0 because I got my mind right. It wasn't that I wasn't capable. It was that I wasn't putting in the work. I needed, again, that sort of needed to be pushed on that right path. And then I was fortunate to get drafted. Herb Stein, 40 years in the game. He signed over 100 players. Rod Carew, Hall of Famer. A lot of World Series MVPs. Frank Viola, Cy Young. And he came to see me a few times. And, on another day, I can share the story on how I performed on that particular day. But I went deep. He was on his way to the parking lot while I was rounding second. I knew I had a shot. And again, I can get into those details, specifically the players, on what you should be doing and how you should be playing and how you should be going about your game situations. From there, drafted 1993. I guess that's 7 years ago, something like that. And fulfilled my childhood dream. But the mistake I made is I should have had the goal of, and I did probably, to get to the big leagues. But, for me, it was getting drafted. And once I got there, you sort of have to shift a little bit, because now that pyramid, now you're playing with the best of the best, not just in your area, but not even in the country, but in the world, right? And, it was a little bit of a culture shock living in Tennessee for a while, but I adjusted, led the team in hitting my rookie year, 7th in the league, was invited to Instruction League. I was a prospect at the time. And then I struggled the next year. I went from being a prospect to a suspect. And then I did get invited back the following year, so parts of 3 seasons. The night before I got released, I got the game-winning hit in the top of the 9th inning. And in the bottom of the 9th, I made 2 diving catches, one with first and second, the other with the tying run at third. And the next day I got sent home. So it was a little bitter pill to swallow. especially coming off a good game like that. And, baseball's brought me a lot of lifelong friends, a lot of values and lessons. You said resiliency, that ability to bounce back from failure. That is the greatest trait. That's a trait most adults wish they had. And I didn't have it then, but I have it now for sure.
So Dan, we've mentioned the word resiliency so many times, and let's start talking about some of the recent situations that you've had to take this resiliency, add it all up, and literally fight for your life. And as the viewers can see you on camera today, a put together, healthy, fit individual that obviously has a lot of energy, values life, takes care of himself, eats well, and just over the past few weeks,
right,
you get hit with COVID-19. And here you are with a wife, 2 children, everything that comes around it. And you're hit with something that literally puts you on your back. I think it's something that, this pandemic has affected a lot of people, and has hurt a lot of people. Your story is so impactfully important because through the grace of God, you've come out to tell the story. And as a speaker, as someone that can really intellectually help people see what this did to you and what was going through your mind and how you broke out of it. And I think I love hearing it every time. And I know people here are going to truly be impacted by it. But you were there. You were on your back. You were brought to the hospital. Take us from that moment when a man like you we've all been sick in our homes, but now a guy like you with your strength is now in the hospital with a world disease. Take us from there.
Well, 7 weeks ago, it was Palm Sunday actually, and I'm lying on my back in a hospital bed, as you mentioned, not knowing if I'm going to get home to see my wife and 2 teenage sons. When you say it put me on my back, Stephen, you couldn't have described it better. In fact, that's what this disease does. It wants you on your back. That's where you're most comfortable. And it's the worst position to be in, actually. Prone position, because it sort of compresses your lungs. And people with pneumonia, which I was diagnosed with when I admitted myself to the hospital, influenza, I don't smoke, and COVID-19 patients, which I was infected with the disease, are dying from something called ARDS, A-R-D-S, acute respiratory distress syndrome. And this disease knocked me on my back. Now, luckily, there were many things that saved me. And you mentioned earlier, I'm writing a book about this, how faith, focus, and fitness. And what that really is spirit, mind, and body. And it took me a lifetime to develop those skills. But the irony is spending my life as my adult career as a personal trainer, helping others with their bodies, and also my background as a collegiate and professional athlete, right? Secondly, working as a life coach and helping individuals and companies with getting the right mindset. So I've done that. And then as of the last 3 years, I've been doing a lot of faith-based speaking, helping people with their spirits. And here I am now needing to lean on others to coach me, what I have provided for years professionally. And, you would think I had it all together and that I just, got right through it because of that. But there was a dark moment, man. It was Palm Sunday evening, 2 o'clock. But let me backtrack to the morning. I was now 10 days with fever, ravaging fever, 102 to 104 for 10 straight days. 13 days with symptoms. The first 3 days I had aches and pains. I thought maybe it was a tough workout that I had given myself. And I took some Advil, and apparently you're not supposed to do that. This was before the studies came out. And so then as soon as I got hit with the fever, I knew I had the disease. I didn't need the test. I had the dry cough. I had the shortness of breath. My body was just weak. Lost my appetite, lost my sense of taste and smell. And then I took myself to the doctor, of course. I have an underlying asthmatic condition, childhood condition that was re-diagnosed just a few years ago. So that's where this sort of bat poison sort of worked its way into my veins. And that morning, Palm Sunday morning, I'm gonna tell you 3 people that helped save, actually a lot more than that, but I call them guardian angels. You can call them coaches, whatever you'd like. The first was my Monsignor, my priest. Virtual mass, and we know at the synagogue, temples are running virtual, services. Churches are doing the same. And my priest, longtime friend, he's actually a Del Barton graduate, played lacrosse over at Holy Cross, and spent 9 years out in Rome working for the Pope. He ends up back in Patterson. I see him at a Del Barton homecoming in October. Find out he's just 3 or 4 miles away from where I live, and we've been going every Sunday, right? So he gives this homily, and I want to share just the one sentence that stuck with me. And I didn't realize how vital it was. He said, "Never feel sorry for yourself." And that's why, we talk about coaches, Mr. Romano, teachers. Somebody says something, and it might not help you immediately. I did not know that 12 hours later, I was going to need to lean on those words. I take myself to the hospital. I call my doctor friend in New York City, and I had this little finger monitor checking my O2 levels. And when I told him the number, he said, "Go." So that was a tough moment to actually, I didn't pack a bag, to say goodbye to your wife and kids, not knowing, you go into a hospital, people are dying, you see the death tolls and so forth. I get to the hospital, they diagnosed me with pneumonia. They had me do jumping jacks, run in place, and the athlete came out in me. I said, I'm going to pass this test, right? And my levels went up a little bit. So they gave me an option. This is what a bad coach, I think, does. When you play the infield halfway in with the bases loaded, make the decision. You want to stop the run, or you want to give up the run and get the out, right? The doctor did not, and I'm not knocking him. Trust me. I mean, on national TV, I've given them the credit. The healthcare workers were phenomenal, and they helped save me. But this ER doctor said, you can stay or you can go home. And I said, well, I'm going to phone a friend. And I phoned my doctor friend. He said, you should stay. And that turned out to be a blessing, because that night, 2 a.m, fever spiked to 104, O2 levels dropped. I needed oxygen, couldn't breathe. My roommate next to me was in terrible shape. It was like we were battling. He would cough, I would cough. He would wheeze, I would wheeze. And that's when my mind started to wander, to drift to that dark place.
So let me just hold you there. We're on the part right now where your mind is wandering, but it really tell people when you're in that state and you're a man of thought, you're a man of faith, you're a man of family, honestly, what really goes through your head at that moment when you're being impacted with all of the chaos that's around. Remember, you're in there, and everybody listening, you're in the hospital in North New Jersey, where literally the epicenter of all this happening, the news is banging around your head, the chaos of this. You have 104 fever. You're laying in the bed. There's a guy coughing next to you. Seriously, man, what's going through your head? You've got an incredible wife at home. You've got 2 teenage boys in high school. What goes on at that moment?
Yeah, you start to go to frustration. Then that leads to doubt. Then it leads to fear. Then you start questioning. And I was just about, you question God, right? And I'm a man of faith even before going in there. And I'm watching the TV, and the death toll numbers are mounting. And you see how people can't have funerals for their loved ones. And I have asthma, and my breathing's, spiraling downward, and my fever's spiking upward. And I can't move my body now at this point. We didn't talk about that. I lost 20 pounds in a week, probably 10 in the hospital.
So you can't even move. You can't push yourself.
I can't get to the arm thing to pick the bed up.
Wow.
Because the remote control is stuck underneath my back. And I wanted to turn the damn TV off, excuse my French, because I didn't want to hear that anymore, because my mind was wandering. And I couldn't reach it. So I had to wait for the nurse to come in to sort of turn the television off and get me up. But what goes through your mind is, oh my God, my wife needs me. My boys need me. I'm not finished yet. And listen, if this is your will, I'm not ready. I'm going to try to talk you out of it. And at that point, I'd say this disease took over my body completely. It tried to take over my mind. At times it did, a time like that. But I did not let it break my spirit. And the minute I got to that point, I thought back to the words of my friend, my priest, who said, never feel sorry for yourself. I was about to cry and say, why me? Why? And I stopped myself in that moment. And then I shifted over and I said, mental focus. Come on, I've been doing this for years. I know what I'm supposed to do. Let's focus on what I can control right now. Let's try to move my arm a little bit. I started doing dumbbell curls with the one pound water bottles, shoulder presses. I was doing laps in the hospital room to the window and back, chair squats. I couldn't get up out of a chair. I needed to use whatever little upper body strength I had. And then I made sure I was on my stomach. I made sure I used a little incentive spirometer, it's called, a little breathing apparatus where it helps expand your lungs. And all the things my roommate wasn't doing, I was then learning from him. He was a little older, but he wasn't turning around. He wasn't getting up. He wasn't using the machine. And I never saw him until they wheeled him out the next day to take him to ICU. I never saw the guy, and we were both too sick to sort of introduce ourselves. But I know what he wasn't doing, but he probably didn't. He probably had the will, but he didn't have the strength. And I think that's why when you hear that the elderly are affected, I think if this, as you said, this disease does not discriminate. I was in pretty good shape, not as in good shape as you, Mr. Bianco, but I was in pretty good shape. And this thing, again, just attacked me and put me on my back. But a strong faith, a strong mindset, and, the physical body, certainly all three of those factors helped me. And it can help anyone in any situation.
So people wonder that sometimes when you're in that situation, that you call that fight or flight. What were you actually saying to yourself? Okay, Dan, no, I am not going to feel sorry for myself. And okay, let's go. I am not ready. I'm not going to let this get me. Was it actually a conscious thought that you said, all right, let's go?
Yes, it was a conscious thought. And, it took me so far, maybe an hour, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 3 hours. And then those thoughts start to creep back in.
They start creeping back in. So it was that push, but then you still could never give up. It wasn't the one-time thing, like in life, right? You can't have one performance, right? It's one performance, and then you have to perform again, and you have to perform again, and you have to just keep going. Would you say that same type of mindset that would get you through professional baseball, that, hey, I had a good at bat, but tomorrow's another day?
Absolutely. The great players keep an even disposition throughout. You'd never know with Derek Jeter if he was 0 for 4 or 4 for 4 at the end of the game. He was steady. The guys that are up and down, really overly excited, and then overly down, they never make it. So, yes, it's the same mindset. What you did yesterday, last week, last month, last at-bat, last foul shot, last, double fault playing tennis, has nothing to do with what you're going to do right now. And that's a mindset. But luckily, when I started to stray back away and to, get into those negative thoughts, I get a text message from one of my childhood friends saying something like, you're the toughest SOB I ever played with. And then text message from someone I played with at the Twins saying, are you kicking Corona's, butt? And I needed, again, those were my coaches at the time. Relying on, people in the past that have helped me along the way. You just sort of put that in your back pocket. You never know when you're going to need it.
Again, back to Mr. Romano, right? Yeah. That the people you set yourself around, the people that were calling you. I know some people might have some questions as we go along. If you do have a question, throw it in the chat. That way we can get to that specific question. We can ask Dan as we go across here. But so if you have any questions, please feel free. Ask any questions that you may think Dan can answer for you. The point of him being on here today is to share this experience with you guys. So Dan, so now you're in the hospital. The guy next to you is maybe being wheeled out. You're starting to sort of you're talking to yourself. You're finding that inner faith to communicate with your mind, to overcome those negative thoughts. You start doing some curls with whatever you have. You're pushing yourself up. Grab us from there. Take us from you're starting to get yourself up a little bit. You're progressing. You're refusing to go on your back.
Right. Well, I think an important topic here we could touch base, and you could spend hours on, is goal setting. I had little goals, and I know that they weren't going to let me out of the hospital. They would give me the oxygen to take home, but they would not let me out of the hospital unless I could get my O2 level to a certain spot while exercising. So I knew they were going to make me do some jumping jacks or run in place as they did when I was admitted. So I knew I needed to get my body right. So every hour on the hour, I had my eyes on the prize. I knew exactly what I needed to do to get out. I needed to improve my strength. I needed to expand my lungs, and I needed to improve my cardiovascular ability. Where in the past, I'd ride 10, 12, 14 miles on my bike. And here, my cardio consisted of a 12-foot trip to the window and back. So it's amazing how you get knocked on your back. The goals may have been small goals, but they were enough to get me out the door. And fortunately, they said it was a record. I got out in 4 days, where the average COVID patient is in there 7 to 14 days.
How many people do you think in that situation would not be setting a goal like that? I mean, it's quite similar to life, Dan, as to, you hear about this all the time. The most successful people in sports and life, there's many different ways of doing it. Not everybody writes in journals. Not everybody puts a vision board up. Not everybody writes on their mirror. But everybody has their own way, whatever suits your boat. But the act of actually consciously setting milestones and goals, even in this situation, a life and death situation for you, to get you out of that, was about goal setting. Absolutely. Each and every day, every moment, every couple hours, another goal. I mean, isn't that so important just for the value of life in general?
Every breath was a goal for me. I don't take it for granted. But you're absolutely right. School, work, sports, community, relationships, set your goals. Another way I set my goal was having a vision. My wife had sent me a picture of our family, and I had that on my little tray table. And that was just my eye on the prize right there. I knew that I had something to go back home to, people that were counting on me and that needed me. But you should set goals. And again, I agree. I think you should write them down. But for me, that little breathing apparatus that I had, they told me I was supposed to do that 10 times an hour. And I was doing it 20, 25 times. They were taking it away from me because they didn't want me to hurt my lungs. So, setting goals, sometimes you set them too high, right? You want a goal of getting 4 hits in a game, and you're 0 for your first 2. That's just not happening, right? So you need to readjust those goals along the way. And there were times, every hour on the hour, I'd get up where my knees would buckle and I couldn't do my walk to the window. So I did, more of this stuff. And that's what life, you're going to have some roadblocks, there's some speed bumps, and you got to sort of shift and move around those things.
So your mindset, goal setting, you're now setting a record. That's the greatest thing about athletes. I love, the world of sports is so powerful and it's so great, and has nothing to do with making as far as you did, Dan, and play professionally. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with finite moments like this. This is what sports is about, yes, right? And how you take this type of mindset of setting a goal, of realizing how valuable your life is, of how learn to have great people around you, people calling you and inspiring you, teammates. Teammates are the greatest inspirational people that you can possibly have around you, but you get that from being a part of a sports environment. It breeds that type, literally, and if you really think about it, and there's another piece here that I want you to get into that's very important to you, and I'll let you lead off of this, but sports and one other thing saved your life, Dan. Sports and one other thing. The fact that what sports taught you, the resiliency of sports, the drive, the determination, the no quit, I don't care if I'm small. I don't care if I grew up with a single mom. I don't care if I grew up with no money. I don't care if I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. I don't care. I'm going to make it, right? That mindset that sports doesn't discriminate in many different ways, that, with the right mindset, with the right drive, you can get through and make it, find your way. Just like you mentioned about this disease, it doesn't discriminate, right? It's going to hit you, but you can also find your way out. as you did. But there's, the sports helped guide you. And one other thing.
My faith in God, man. I got to be honest with that. I mean, I had 5,000 people praying for me that Palm Sunday morning. With the virtual mass, you can fill those churches up 10, 20 times. There's power there in prayer. I prayed the entire time, and my faith is what kept me focused. Focus then turned me to my body, and that's why I say focus, faith, focus, fitness, spirit, mind, body. But there's no doubt, if I didn't have the physical strength, that was the armory, that was the weaponry, the armor that I needed to defeat an opponent much greater than any other opponent I've ever faced before. I can hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, but this invisible disease that sort of took over every morsel of my body, I could have very easily, if I didn't have the mindset given up, if I had nothing to go home to, or if I didn't have a faith, or if I didn't want to, do some good things afterwards, if I was ready to just pack it in, I could, I wouldn't be here speaking to you, Stephen. But certainly that the body being in good shape, I can't say it enough. It saved me, and it'll save you from a lot of other diseases, coronary artery disease. Work out, eat right. I mean, I want to look like you. That's what I'm working towards.
Have faith. Where I had to throw that at you there. So where does your faith come from, Dan? Where is its foundation? I know, and I think it's really important for people to hear when someone has something very powerful, just like sports. When someone has a powerful career in sports, I love the fact that I want people to be able to hear what that person went through, what their life was about, because we can hold on to that. Once we start hearing people's real stories, we gravitate towards that because it becomes real. Yes, there's, we see Minnesota Twins. It's like, well, that's a pie in the sky. It could be reality for people, right? It can be. It was for you at the end of the day, but, it's hard to see that sometimes until you start seeing somebody's or hearing somebody's story. Then it becomes more real. Like, wait a minute, I can have a taste of that. I see something in Dan that I see in myself. What's your faith built on? And how did you develop such a strong base of faith?
And I came from my mother, no doubt. And when we were younger, we went to church, but I strayed away a little bit during my high school and college years. But I was always a believer. But I just got to a point where I said, I can't do this alone. That I need to know that there's someone looking out for me, and that there's a God looking out for each and one of us, every one of us. And the sports are great, and the mental mindset is great. For me, my relationship I have with God, when I say spirit, mind, body, that's the way I begin every day. And that wasn't my entire life. This is maybe 3 years ago where I begin my day on my knees, just a state of grace, state of thankfulness. And now, over the last 7 weeks, I stayed down there a little bit longer. And the first thing I say is, thank you for this breath. When you can't breathe and your lung, it hurt for me to take a quarter of a breath. When you can't breathe and then all of a sudden you have oxygen coming into your lungs, I see life so much. And I had a near-death experience 25 years ago, car accident that was pretty emotional and spiritual. But this time, I am so grateful to be here, Stephen, to be able to help some people. And that's, to me, that's the story. The story is now I'm ready to really, I thought I helped some people before, but I'm ready to help you with your focus, with your fitness, with your faith. And I think we all need to lean on that.
Incredible story, Dan. It really wraps from the way you were brought up, what you came from, the many people that came into your life that have impacted you and have inspired you, and now how you're able to go out and speak upon this to young people and us old people as well. And I've always found that you're not only an inspiring figure to young people, but also to adults, right? Where it doesn't stop when you're young. I think it's something that we miss. I know there's plenty of adults on today's session that, being inspired isn't just for kids. Being inspired as adults, we need that just as much as we needed when we were young. There are so many things that hit us in life that we continue to need inspiration and faith. And what's something that you can relay from, your coaching? You've said a lot to some of the young kids. What can you relay to adults, in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that can inspire us to find a sense of strength when going through difficult times like this?
That it's never too late. I just found a newfound career for me. Speaking just came, 2 years ago at age 46 years old. So my dream was to play professional baseball. And I'm sure a lot of those viewers on here have dreams for whatever sports they're playing in. As you said, it's not really about playing the game. It's about what you're learning from the game, what you'll carry with you, because the game doesn't last forever. Matt will tell you that. Steve, you can vouch for that. We play as long as this game allows us to play, and some of us ended in high school. Others, get to college, and very few get to go on to get a paycheck for it. So to those adults that had those dreams just like I did, when one dream is taken away, you have to sort of find those little mini dreams, the ones that make life worth living. And you see, one of the very first summers that I wasn't playing baseball was after I got released from the Twins. And that's when I ended up on the beach. And, on the beach, that's where I found my wife. So, growing up playing baseball, I was never able to go to the beach. So, I believe God closes a window, he opens up a door in my case. And those are the mini dreams. So I wouldn't trade my family in for, a Hall of Fame baseball career. So you just never know. You're not finished yet. So my advice to adults would be, just keep the faith, keep the focus, and surround yourself with the right people. Because the people that inspire you, intellectual people, motivated people, you get like those who you hang around. And to Mr. Romano's point, I read this book from George Washington. He wrote it when he was 16 years old. And they're just little tidbits, little nuggets of advice. And the one thing alludes to this same point. He said, associate yourself in the company of quality men. I'll add, and women. It was a different time back then. If you esteem your own reputation, for it is better to be alone than in bad company. And to me, that's, it's one of the same. It hasn't changed in 200 years. It hasn't changed in 2,000 years. You're going to find your way. Just keep the faith.
Dan, let's finish on this. Just a reminder to anybody, if you do have a question, please pop it in the chat, or we'll give one question if you want to have a chance to have a back and forth with Dan. We'll open that up as well. We want, Dan is such a special person, and these are such special times. So we want to be able to accommodate people in all different ways. But Dan, if you can give, a lot of times where we can hear quotes like that and we can get inspired, but, as a kid, a young adult, I don't want to use the word kid, a young adult or an adult, can you give us 2 ways for each that we can actually use to accomplish that goal of, we have people in our lives that maybe they shouldn't be in our lives. Maybe there's, there are times like that. It's spoken word, that in written word that says, hey, you have to rid some of that. So you have to peel that onion back. You have to rid some of that. And it's so hard to do. And I know so many people struggle with it in younger years, especially because you just don't know. But in older years, it's really hard. You feel bad about it sometimes. Can you help guide us a little bit on those 2 ways? And we'll finish on that, and then we'll get to some questions if there are any. How do you shed some of those people that need to be shed in order for you to surround yourself with strength?
Well, as far as the younger people, I have 2 teenage sons, and what I tell them, if I see that they're sort of not hanging out with the right crowd, I say, blame us, blame mom and dad. Come with, you have something to do, and I'll make sure we have something to do to keep you from hanging out with a crowd that's not bringing the best out of you, bringing the worst. Because people not only bring the best out of you, but others bring the worst out of you, right?
Sure.
As far as adults are concerned, I run into the same, as you said, it's very difficult, Stephen. I have, friends from college, drinking buddies that just sort of never grew up, right? And back then I was really tight with them, and I don't disown them as friends, But again, when you're an adult, I sort of pick and choose. I want to hang around you because I know I'm learning, I'm growing. I don't want to hang around someone who's going to bring me down. I want to inspire, and if he's ready, and I've had conversations with one particular friend that I have, and if he's ready to sort of take it to the next level, I'm happy to hang out with you. But I don't want to just sit here and reminisce about the old days and drink beer all night. I want to be able to, I want to take it to the next level. So I'll never disown those friends. They're part of who I am, and I try to help them. But I pick and choose who I spend time with. Time is precious, especially now for me more than ever. Every minute counts, and it's not about the money; it's about the moments, And I don't want to miss out on any quality moments, wasting it, somewhere just wasting time away. So that I don't know if I answered the question fully, but that's.
No, you totally did, Dan. That's a great way to respond to that. If anybody has any questions, please jump in now or throw it in the chat. We'll give it a couple seconds here. Pop yourself off mute. Give a question. If not, it's fine. Dan probably covered so much of it. It's an honor to have Dan as part of the 360 family now. And we look forward to having him around to do a lot more events, hopefully in person soon as we begin to conquer this pandemic, and people have the opportunity to actually spend time face-to-face with someone like Dan Venenzia. So if there are any questions, please shoot them out now. Give a couple seconds, otherwise we'll wrap it up. Okay, if there's no questions, Dan, thank you so much for sharing this experience with us tonight. It's great to have someone like you involved with 360. We look forward to you being involved with Centercourt 360 more. It really is what Centercourt is about as an organization, what the 360 model represents, and that's the full circle of life that revolves around our one commonality. One commonality is sports, and that's what the foundation of Centercourt is built on. But we all know it takes so much more to become a well-rounded person, and that's why we, Centercourt, and thanks to Matt for bringing this to the Centercourt family, the 360 model, so that we learn about sports, we learn about faith, in all different formats of life, faith in ourselves, faith in other people, faith in our families. We learn about our overall health. We learn about our mental health, opportunities to be tutored in the subjects that athletes need assistance on, learn about the recruiting process for college, learn about how to get through the tough times in high school, learn about how to apply to high schools that you may want to choose from, and have role models like your Mr. Romano. And I think that's one of the most important parts about 360 is that it presents an opportunity for young people to meet people like you, Dan, and to have that chance to say, hey, Mr. Venenzia, can you spare a moment? I've got a question for you. So, Dan, thank you for tonight. Thank you for your words. Thank you for sharing it with us. And we are very happy that you were able to overcome this disease.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks, Stephen, for having me. Matt, thanks, man.
Thanks so much, Dan. Appreciate it, buddy.
You got it. Be in touch.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, guys.